Crimea is a small-looking peninsula with an outsized place in history. It sits on the northern edge of the Black Sea, connected to mainland Ukraine by the narrow isthmus of Perekop, and separated from Russia's Krasnodar region by the Strait of Kerch. To the northeast, the Arabat Spit divides shallow lagoons from the Sea of Azov. Across the Black Sea lie Romania and Turkey, making Crimea not a remote corner, but a maritime crossroads. Today, it has a population of roughly 2.4 million, with Sevastopol as its largest city. Internationally, Crimea is recognized as part of Ukraine, but since 2014 it has been under Russian occupation and claimed by Russia. To understand why this peninsula is so contested, you have to look at geography first. Whoever controls Crimea gains influence over Black Sea routes, military access, ports, and the southern approaches to Eastern Europe. Crimea's importance begins with its shape and location. The peninsula is almost surrounded by water, which makes it defensible and valuable for trade, naval bases, and movement between regions. Its northern land connection is narrow, meaning armies and governments have often treated it as a strategic gateway. The Crimean Bridge, completed by Russia in 2018 after the occupation began, added a physical road and rail link across the Kerch Strait to Russia. That bridge was not just infrastructure, it symbolized an attempt to bind the peninsula more tightly to Russia despite international objections. Crimea's coast also offers access to warm water ports, a major strategic prize in a region where many northern ports can be limited by ice, distance, or geography. This combination of defensibility, sea access, and proximity to several civilizations made Crimea a place empires repeatedly wanted to control. Long before modern borders, Crimea was known as the Tauric Peninsula and sat at the edge of two worlds, the settled classical world around the Mediterranean and Black Sea, and the open steppe stretching into Eurasia. Greek settlers founded colonies along the southern coast, creating ports and trading towns that connected Crimea to wider networks of grain, fish, metals, and slaves. These Greek communities were later absorbed into the Roman and Byzantine spheres, yet many retained a strong Greek cultural identity for centuries. This coastal Crimea was outward-looking, tied to ships, markets, and imperial politics. The interior, however, was shaped more by steppe societies, whose mobility and military power connected Crimea to the vast lands north and east of the Black Sea. That split between coast and steppe became a repeating pattern in Crimean history. During the medieval period, Crimea became a meeting point of merchants, nomads, and empires. Some coastal cities developed into trading colonies of Genoa, the Italian Maritime Republic. These ports linked Crimea to Mediterranean commerce and made it part of a much larger economic system. But the interior was dominated by the power of the steppe. In the 13th century, the Golden Horde, a Mongol successor state, brought Crimea under its influence. From that world emerged the Crimean Khanate, a successor state that would become one of the most important political forces in the region. The Khanate was not simply a local kingdom, it sat between powerful neighbors and drew strength from cavalry warfare, steppe networks, and its position near the Black Sea. Crimea was becoming both a trade hub and a military frontier. In the 15th century, the Crimean Khanate became a dependency of the Ottoman Empire. This tied Crimea to one of the major powers of the early modern world. Ottoman influence gave the Khanate protection and connected it to imperial politics stretching from the Balkans to the Middle East. At the same time, lands controlled by Russia and Poland-Lithuania were often targeted by slave raids from the Crimean steppe world. These raids were a brutal part of the regional economy and left deep memories in neighboring societies. Crimea was not just a passive possession of larger empires, it was an active player in conflicts across Eastern Europe. Its rulers could influence the balance of power between Moscow, Warsaw, Istanbul, and steppe groups. For centuries, Crimea's position made it both a shield and a spear. The great turning point came in the late 18th century. After the Russo-Turkish War of 1768 to 1774, Russian influence over the region expanded sharply. In 1783, the Russian Empire annexed Crimea. This was a major strategic gain for Russia, giving it a stronger foothold on the Black Sea and helping turn the empire into a southern maritime power. The annexation also weakened Ottoman influence in the region and changed the political map of Eastern Europe. For Russia, Crimea became a prized imperial possession, tied to naval ambition and southward expansion. For local peoples, especially the Crimean Tatars, Russian rule brought demographic, political, and cultural pressure. Over time, settlement patterns changed, imperial administration expanded, and Crimea was increasingly integrated into Russian strategic thinking. Crimea's strategic value became globally visible during the Crimean War of the 1850s. The conflict, fought from 1853 to 1856, brought Russia into confrontation with an alliance that included the Ottoman Empire, Britain, France, and Sardinia. The war is remembered for the siege of Sevastopol, one of the peninsula's most important port cities. Sevastopol was not just another city, it was a naval base and symbol of Russia's Black Sea power. The fighting exposed how important Crimea was to control of the region, and how quickly a local strategic position could draw in outside powers. The war also revealed weaknesses in the Russian Empire and became a landmark in military history, logistics, and war reporting. Crimea had become a stage where European power politics were fought directly. After the Russian Revolution of 1917, Crimea went through instability and short-lived regimes, reflecting the wider collapse of imperial authority. Different forces competed for control as civil war reshaped the former Russian Empire. When the Bolsheviks finally secured Crimea, it became an autonomous Soviet republic within the Russian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic. This status recognized, at least formally, that Crimea had a distinct regional identity inside the Soviet system. But Soviet autonomy did not mean full freedom. Moscow remained the center of real power, and Crimea's politics, economy, and population were reshaped by Soviet priorities. The peninsula's military and naval importance continued, especially through Sevastopol, while its ethnic and cultural complexity remained a sensitive issue beneath the surface. World War II brought disaster to Crimea. The peninsula was occupied by Nazi Germany, and when Soviet forces retook it in 1944, Joseph Stalin ordered the deportation of the Crimean Tatars. The entire people were accused collectively of collaboration, a charge used to justify mass removal. Crimean Tatars were forced from their homeland and sent primarily to Central Asia under harsh conditions. Many died from hunger, disease, and the trauma of deportation. This act has been described as ethnic cleansing and cultural genocide because it aimed not only to punish individuals, but to uproot a people from their land and erase their presence. In 1945, Crimea was downgraded from an autonomous republic to an oblast, reducing its formal status within the Soviet system. In 1954, Crimea was transferred from the Russian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic to the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic. The official occasion was the 300th anniversary of the Pereyaslav Treaty of 1654, which Soviet narratives framed as a historic bond between Russia and Ukraine. At the time, both republics were inside the same Soviet Union, so the transfer did not create an international border in the way it later would. But it mattered administratively and historically. Crimea became governed as part of Soviet Ukraine, tied to Ukrainian infrastructure, planning, and institutions. Decades later, after the Soviet Union collapsed, this Soviet-era decision became central to competing political claims. What had once been an internal administrative boundary became an internationally recognized state border. When Ukraine became independent in 1991, Crimea remained within Ukraine. Most of the peninsula was reorganized as the Autonomous Republic of Crimea, while Sevastopol had a special status because of its naval importance. One major issue was the Soviet Black Sea Fleet, based in Crimea. Russia and Ukraine had to negotiate what would happen to ships, bases, and military access after the USSR disappeared. A 1997 treaty allowed Russia to continue basing its fleet in Sevastopol under agreed terms. This arrangement reflected compromise, but it also preserved a Russian military presence on Ukrainian territory. Crimea therefore entered the post-Soviet era with overlapping identities, legal arrangements, and strategic sensitivities that could become dangerous if relations between Kiev and Moscow deteriorated. In 2014, following political upheaval in Ukraine, Russian forces occupied Crimea. Russia then announced the annexation of the peninsula after a disputed referendum held under military occupation. Most countries did not recognize the annexation and continue to regard Crimea as Ukrainian territory. For Ukraine and much of the international community, the issue is one of sovereignty and territorial integrity. Borders cannot be changed by force. For Russia, Crimea is presented through claims of history, security, and local identity, but those claims have not overridden international recognition of Ukraine's borders. Since then, Crimea has remained one of the core issues in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Its ports, bridge, military bases, and symbolic weight make it more than a territorial dispute. Crimea is where geography, empire, memory, law, and power all collide. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.